After 3 years of being called a failure, Kangi returns to the academy looking just like the weak boy everyone used to laugh at. But this time, everything has changed. The second exam starts and he instantly stuns the whole school. He didn't just win the 100-meter dash, he shattered the old record in a flash. One by one, every test becomes a nightmare for the other students, but Kanagi crushes every record like it means nothing, pushing through grueling exercises and endless endurance challenges with ease. The very ones who used to look down on him stand silent and shocked as the academy's weakest student suddenly turns into a monster. But the final test will hit us with the biggest shock of all. When Kanagi finally lets go of his power, the machine shatters instantly, throwing the whole school into chaos. But things weren't always like this. Kanagi was the only one who didn't pass the exam. While the whole class was cheering about passing, our MC Kanagi Minato felt a strange emptiness inside, and it was the third time he had stumbled. He was the student who stuck around to tidy up the classroom. That single moment nearly made him shed tears as he felt how useless he had become. One of his classmates said everyone had to head to the school entrance. It was a guy named Hizaki Kaisa, an A-rank hunter who used to be a student at this very school before he became famous. He showed up to film a documentary about his days as a top student before he became famous. But the real truth, which the cameras never caught, was this. Hizaki Kaisa was a terrible guy who used to beat up Kanagi every single day without any reason. The thought of that guy made our protagonist shake with fear. Hizaki Kaisa told the cameras that Kanagi was a true friend who always helped him study and even lent him money because Kanagi's family was poor. Those lies were just a trick to make Hizaki Kaisa shine brighter in front of the cameras. Since Kanagi lacked the courage, he just nodded along with everything Hizaki said. As cameras flashed, Kanagi's mind burned with memories, hating the guy who made him feel powerless and empty once the shoot was over. When he was young, Kanagi adored reading tales of the legendary heroes who saved the world. When the Tower of Malevolence loomed over us, threatening to crush humanity with its terrifying monsters, a group of incredible heroes rose up and saved the world, proving themselves truly amazing. One guy took down 10,000 soldiers with a wooden stick, though honestly, a pencil would have done just as well. Centuries ago, there stood a mage so mighty she could whisper spells into existence, turning her into a living legend. As soon as that mark shows up on your skin, you're destined to wake up, grow strong and become famous. But sadly, Kanagi failed the test 3 times, and his dream was finally gone. Just before heading out, Hizaki Kaisa stopped by to tell his classmate that he'd gotten the association to let Kanagi take the test again. He had to head to the founder's sanctuary later to meet him. Leaving the hero baffled, he realized this jerk was truly bad, yet if his move was just to look better, then it didn't really matter. As long as Kanagi was given another shot, he would definitely take it. Later, at the founder's mausoleum, cameras roll as Hizaki steps up to the historic tomb to deliver his grand final speech. Once the interview is over, the reporters thank him with happy hearts over the great footage they captured, and Hieki plays the perfect celebrity by saying he can't wait to read the article. But once they were gone, he went deeper into the tomb to where his men were digging, and he asked if they had found the entrance, point excitedly to a secret doorway, wondering if this is finally what they've been searching for. But suddenly, a voice calls out from behind. When Kanagi showed up ready to retake the exam, the kids noticed what they were up to. To him, this spot felt holy. He could still feel the warmth of the people he loved most, right there in his mind. When he tried to stop the looters, his Aki Kaisa struck them back with every ounce of power an awakened being could summon. The punch was so hard that it felt like Kanagi's heart and soul all broke into pieces. The men yelled that they had stolen everything of worth. Everything was tucked away inside. Kanagi felt like he was dying, but even in that moment he knew it was wrong for them to take it. Then Hiseki Kaisa lunged at Kanagi, revealing his dark secret. He knew all about the weakest student who spent his days obsessing over ancient ancestors in the library, and his perfect plan was to toss the protagonist into the river behind the sanctuary, to take the blame for opening the founder's tomb, a hit meant to kill him that left him with no strength as he sank, while remembering how all his daily training and hard studying for his dream were in vain. Down at the lake's bottom, lights flickered on all around him. Even though the water was freezing, they still felt warm and comfortable. Kanagi heard them whisper that he was chosen as the vessel for this new generation. These brave spirits got trapped and locked away right here. Kanagi held the crest of nothingness in his hand. It offered no strength to its owner, but whoever held it could call upon the spirit of any founder. Kanagi had to decide right then which hero to make a pact with. The protagonist shouted that he wanted to master magic, endurance, swordsmanship, and spear art, choosing every single one of those powerful skills. The heroes argued that wouldn't happen, but before they could prove it, they were all pulled into the mark. Every soul slipped safely inside the seal. While Hikaki and his thief friend stood by the lake, an explosion in the water startled them, but one of them miraculously had an umbrella. When they saw Kanagi, the loser they thought was dead, floating there with a new intense expression, they laughed and called him a resilient cockroach until he grabbed a nearby stick. The two guys laughed and mocked him for trying to fight with a stick, sarcastically comparing him to John Wick. Kanagi didn't even flinch, he just kept trying out his tricks. Then Hizaki spoke in a serious voice, telling them to make sure he never left the bottom of the lake again. Then one of the men pulled out his sword and vowed to toss Kanagi back into the lake. When he unleashed a flurry of real sword cuts in a single second, the opponent was too blinded to see them and only realized the damage when his body began to fall apart. Hizaki and the chubby guy couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was clear this guy wasn't the same loser from before. The chubby guy unleashed his strongest spell, which would crush the helpless Kanagi who had no magic left to defend himself. He pointed his finger, and before he could speak a word, lightning struck the spot. It was easy to land the hit because the target was huge. Even so, Hizaki was shocked because that was clearly magic being cast without any spoken words. That sword move felt like the greatest swordsman was right there, and that spell looked exactly like something a legendary mage would cast. Hizaki couldn't figure out why all 106 founders had suddenly ended up inside Kanagi. The hero vowed that a new name would be carved into history, marking Hizaki as the first evil to fall to the mighty Kanagi Minato. As he gets closer, Hizaki stares in horror and accepts the impossible truth that the boy he discarded actually swallowed the founders' souls through the crest of nothingness. While inside Kanagi's mind, the freed founders go wild, arguing over who controls their new body. Even as the legendary swordsman Hinoi Reiaru casually tells Kanagi he's not surprised the boy still remembers his name. He questions Kanagi on his next move, laughs off Hizaki as insignificant, and turns his focus to a far greater danger hiding right behind him. Kanagi stares down the trembling Hizaki, who nervously boasts about being an A-rank hunter, but Kanagi doesn't even bother to reply. With one hard punch, he sends Hizaki flying. Hanagi turns his gaze to the strange bag, which seems to be glowing with a dark, unnatural energy. As he watches, a huge wave of power bursts from within, surprising him, while Hinoi just watches with a calm smile. Meanwhile, back in the city, a giant three-headed wolf is tearing everything apart, and a man yells for Akane to stop it. Without even pausing for a breath, Akane springs into action, soaring above the beast with perfect grace to crash down like a waterfall and smash the A-rank monster into dust in one mighty blow. The entire crowd goes wild, screaming their support for the S-rank hunter. Akane bowed her head with gratitude before urgently asking, "Where is Hizaki?" One of the men guessed that Hizaki was likely busy with an interview, and he thought it sounded pretty cool to be called the Young Hope. Kane shrugs off Hizaki's fame as a boost for their guild, but right as they head out, a terrifying shockwave hits the whole city, knocking civilians and hunters down so fast that Kane realizes an S-rank monster must have shown up. The heavy weight of that pressure comes straight from the founder's tomb. Back in the forest, a terrified Hizaki forces himself up and freezes in horror as a giant monster crawls out of the bag. He stammers, wondering if it was a demon or some strange creature. Kanagi reveals that by stealing the relics, Hizaki shattered the seal, keeping one of the tower's first boss monsters contained. Kanagi's mind holds a beast of pure emptiness, a creature far beyond strength, instantly recognized by Hinoi's expert eye. He says the monster's toxic glow could kill thousands, and that such beasts were all too common in his time, which is too much for Hizaki to take, so he snaps and runs away. He knows that staying just one more second means certain death, but Kanagi understands a predator's instincts and warns that running will only get him killed faster. So by the time Hizaki moves, the monster strikes with terrifying speed and shoots a massive tentacle right at him. He barely lifts his sword before a tentacle spikes through his chest. The very sword that once slayed the dragon now can't even scratch it. As the creature's tentacles wrapped around Hizaki and stole his life, his screams rang out across the forest. But Kanagi just stood there and watched, knowing all along that this was the only way things could end. As the old hero fades away, Hinoi's spirit rests a hand on Kanagi's shoulder, offering to teach him his one-handed sword style, but really just wanting to take full control of his body. Before Kanagi could even speak, the other founders jumped in, yanking Hinoi by his hair and shouting that he was trying to steal their powerful new vessel. Kanagi cuts through the arguing to set his own rule. No single founder will rule alone. Instead, they must all share his body. He vows that one day he will rise above them all and prove his power with strength. If they want to use his body, they'll have to show him what real power looks like. Hinoi just smiles at his boldness and sharpens his sword for the fight. Using the chance, Hinoi links minds with Kanagi and pushes his team to move. Then as Hinoi spirit raises his sword, Kanagi's body copies the motion to slice off the monster's huge arm before the beast swings back, only for Kanagi, now sharing another founder's speed, to dodge with impossible grace. As the spirits take turns stacking their power, one finally gives him the strength to catch it. The monster crashes into the ground as Kanagi grabs a bow to shoot arrows through its skin, then blasts it with swirling winds, fire and ice before a giant wizard inside him zaps the beast with lightning when it tries to sneak up. Then with one last mighty jump, Kanagi flies high above the monster. Hinoi seizes the broken sword, swings his signature one-handed wave-cutting attack, and cleaves the demon in two to stop its rampage, leaving Kanagi with a triumphant smile as the halves fall. A lone raven perched in a nearby tree watches the whole battle unfold. While another man stands atop a skyscraper and answers his phone, he is stunned to learn the monster has already been defeated before he could even get there. He asks if any strong hunters were there, but the voice on the other end says the Raven's footage shows it was actually an academy student who brought it down. The world's strongest awakened warrior, Ikihara Midori, says he wants to meet this student, so the next morning Midoriya sits on a pile of monster corpses and calls the academy director to explain that an S-rank hunter named Kanagi Minato, not him, actually killed the beast, which surprises Midori because Kanagi has failed the hunter exam 3 years in a row, prompting Midori to ask the director for a special favor. Back at the academy, the students are buzzing about everything that just happened. The scary vibe from yesterday still left most of them frozen, so now they're all wondering just who could have beaten such a monster. Kanagi limps through the campus, gripping his stick as his whole body shakes. He hears them talking and is stunned to find that the whole school is already buzzing about what happened. Suddenly a guy bumps right into him, knocks him down and scoffs at the idea that a weakling like him could be the S-rank slayer. Kanagi knows the hard truth. He only defeated the demon by letting the founders take control of his body, and now he's suffering the terrible cost of their power. As he fights to rise, a voice taunts him right in his head. Hinoi reminds him of his bold promise to surpass them, pushing him to get together with a challenging but encouraging tone, so Kanagi remembers his vow, ignores the pain, stands back up, and quietly reaffirms his goal while Hinoi chuckles inside him, urging him to show some resolve. The spirit sighs with disappointment as he scans the nearby students, realizing these modern awakeners are no stronger than regular people and far weaker than the warriors of his own time, leading him to fear that if the tower appeared now, the world would be doomed. His train of thought stops instantly as he feels a massive power nearby. Kanagi senses Hinoi suddenly tighten up, but the spirit just shrugs it off like it doesn't matter. Just then, a professor yells for Kanagi to come over, so assuming it's about his expulsion letter, he walks over carefully. After all, he's failed 3 times now, and there simply aren't any chances left. But to his sheer amazement, the professor sends him straight to the field for another test, leaving Kane frozen in disbelief. Other students press against the windows, whispering with excitement because no one has ever gotten a hunter re-examination before. On the field, Kanagi drops into his sprinter stance, ready to race despite his lack of full recovery, determined to tackle the first challenge, a 100-meter dash. The kid who knocked him out just starts trash-talking again, calling him a loser. But as the test starts, everyone holds their breath in stunned silence, while Kane crosses the finish line in just 1.2 seconds, shattering the old record of 2.7. Next up is the 3,000-meter run, where he clocks a blazing 1 minute and 17 seconds to shatter the old record, proving he dominates every single test from push-ups to bench press. He doesn't just break the records, he more than doubles them, leaving the students completely speechless. Kanagi doubts that the founders are pulling strings behind the scenes, but Hinoi insists it's all Kanagi's own doing. While Midori reads Kanagi's file, the headmaster admits that even though his new physical scores are amazing, the real problem has always been his magic. For 3 years, every test showed that his mana levels were completely gone, which made doctors think he was beyond any chance of recovery. Midori the secretary just smirks, hinting that things are about to get interesting, while Kangi stands on the field facing his final magic test where the professor asks him to channel mana into a fan to spin it for 30 seconds and beat the record of 4,022 turns. But as he gets ready, the painful memories of failing this same test year after year flood back because despite all his hard work, the fan has never even trembled under his attempts. He couldn't feel the magic energy that always held him back, but this time everything is different. For the first time, he feels a strange energy swirling through his body from his right foot, back up and down again, realizing he can control its speed with his breath and push it out through his right palm. The moment the professor starts the test, Kanagi lets his mana flow, and the fan whirs to life at a shocking speed. The counting machine can't keep up with the speeding numbers, and the strong wind blows them right out of sight. Speed so fast no one could guess. The machine roared and the fan, ripped right off, flew like a blade across the field, screaming past the students who shouted in terror as it hurtled straight for the main building and slammed into the headmaster's office with a deafening crash, leaving the headmaster just barely dodging the flying junk, only to collapse from the sheer shock of it all. Stunned by the mess, Midori's secretary can barely believe what happened, while Midori just laughs calmly as if nothing is wrong. To him, Kanagi's powers are clearly a match for his own, and since Midori says Kanagi is the only one besides himself to ever score so high, the bewildered professor has to admit that Kanagi has finally passed the hunter exam. The students erupt in cheers as a wave of excitement ripples through them, knowing Kanagi didn't just break every record but went far beyond what anyone ever dreamed possible. Kanagi stares at his own hands, shaking with disbelief. He spent years thinking he couldn't use magic, but the power was inside him the whole time. From the sidelines, Hanuki watches with a quiet smile, knowing this result was exactly what he had planned for. Kanagi realizes everything has changed because he unlocked his hidden power by giving his body to the founders, prompting Hinoi to laugh inwardly at how extraordinary the man before him truly is, especially since his mark of nothingness seemed to mean he had been waiting for this exact moment for over 100 years, until suddenly an overwhelming presence crashes down and sends a shockwave through the air. The sheer force left him speechless as his mind scrambled to understand the explosion, but Hanoki instantly recognized the powerful aura. It was the same one he felt earlier. Standing before him, as if formed from the pressure itself, was the legendary Midori. Kanagi stares in shock, realizing right then that he is looking at the strongest hunter of all. After landing, Midori speaks directly to him, praising his success in the hunter exam, but Kanagi can hardly find the words to reply before being handed a shocking new task. Land a single hit on Midori, the world's strongest hunter, which leaves Kanagi frozen in stunned silence. Standing before him was Midori, a 23-year-old man who became a full hunter at just 9 years old. His legendary feats are unmatched in all of history, as he once turned thousands of demons to ash in seconds and wiped out deadly outbreaks on Kyushu and elsewhere, while others simply dared not stand against him, leaving Kanagi in total disbelief as Midori explains this overwhelming challenge. But Hananoi is thrilled and presses Kanagi to hand over his body right now, while Midori calmly explains that Kanai has just 1 minute to strike, with no real consequences if he fails, and that Midori will only attack once every 10 seconds to keep the contest fair. Kanagi didn't need to pause or second-guess himself, for every skill and weapon stood ready for him, while Midori left his own power unused and instead piled up a massive collection of weapons just to show he meant it, letting Kanagi pick whatever he wanted. Seeing a flood of legendary weapons appear instantly made the challenge feel surreal and left Kanagi confused, so when he realized he had to face the famous Midori alone, he hesitated and asked if he could use any weapon, only for Midori to casually pick up a katana with a light yet confident grip. He sliced the blade right in half like snapping a dry twig, and he said his own body was sharper than any sword without even trying to brag. Before Kanagi could even make sense of what he had just seen, Hinoi's impatience boiled over, and with frustration dripping from his voice, he demanded to take the wheel. Hanoki's rage bubbled over at Midori's smugness, and as Kanagi felt his friend's power surge to match that of the founders, he realized those words were truly unforgivable. Facing a strength so great, he had no real hope of winning. Still, once it clicked, there was no time to hesitate. While everyone else was out of the way, all the students stayed put just to watch the fight. Before anyone could say anything, Midori started counting down without a single warning. A small smile touched his lips as he gave the signal to begin the test. Kanagi snatches up his sword and lunges at Midori, ready to strike. Hinoi asks if he really wants to fight alone since he thinks it isn't fair. Kanagi keeps slashing at Midori, who barely moves to dodge, while Midori casually checks his phone and jokes that their fight will soon be a viral sensation because he insists on proving his own strength without any help. The students stare in shock as Midori dodges every hit while treating the fight like a joke. As Kanagi attacks without stopping, a student realizes his moves feel strange. Kanagi raises his sword, brings it down in a perfect vertical cut, and instantly switches to a horizontal strike aimed at Midori's feet and throat, moving so smoothly that he marvels at his own control. Noticing that he isn't getting tired, he starts to think maybe lending his energy to the founder's power is what's making him feel this way. His thoughts get suddenly interrupted when Midori puts a finger to his head, ready to flick him, and casually notes that 10 seconds have already gone by. Kanagi barely slips away, but Midori's burst of power wipes out the entire field. Kanagi realizes that had the attack hit, his head would have vanished, leaving Midori confused as she senses no anger from him and wonders if she overpowered him. Kanagi is seized by panic as he realizes he won't survive much longer. Desperate to remember his old strength, he pushes himself, and a sudden burst of power surprises Midori just as Kanagi speeds up, leaving the students awestruck and shouting that their camera can't even follow the action. Midori feels Kanagi's change and wonders if this power needs a special trigger or if he is hiding it on purpose. Midori counts 10 more seconds, then bends down to flick Kanagi, but instead he smacks him hard in the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. Kanagi coughs up blood but grins, thrilled to be battling the world's strongest fighter because he knows that his body has grown so strong it can survive a blow that would have killed him just yesterday. But he knows his skills aren't strong enough to pass Midori's test yet. Driven by sheer will, he charges forward with brute force, but Midori suddenly appears beside him with impossible speed, halting his advance as she apologizes and tells him she has seen enough. He then says the 30 seconds are up before hitting Kanagi on the back of the neck to make him slowly pass out. As Kanagi falls, Midori sees that while he is a genius, he isn't on the same level as his teammates. In the end, Kanagi couldn't let loose all the power that Midori had felt. He called his secretary to tell her they needed to head back, shaking his head at how things had gone wrong. Just then, Kanagi grabs his sword, and Midori instantly feels a powerful energy surge from behind. She turns to see Kanagi glowing with strength, only for Hinoi to speak through him and reveal that the stubborn boy is already asleep, letting him take over, so he suggests they keep fighting a bit longer, while Kanagi's spirit, now separated from his body, panics at the sight of Hanoki controlling him. Yet Midori just smiles, knowing exactly who he is. He wonders if Kanagi is a completely different person or just a skill at work, but one thing is clear. Under Hanoki's control, Kanagi has become a monster and suddenly attacks, shouting at Midori not to zone out. Midori instantly sees that his movements have shifted, with his speed and strength now reaching a whole new level. Just as a sword swung right at Midori's face, he ducked and barely escaped the blow. Kanagi swings hard again, making Midori jump back to put some space between them. Still stunned, Midori watches Kanagi swing his sword again, but she ducks just in time to let the blade crash into the building behind her. Inside, the students scramble in panic as they realize the danger, but Midori sees that Kanagi's slashes have turned unpredictable, and he still manages to guess where the attacks will land. Brings him memories of old sword fighting, where the blade moves like a strong, never-ending stream of water. Midori raises his hand with a laugh, saying such skill is needed to beat an S rank like him, then lifts it again to try putting Kanagi to sleep, since only 40 seconds have gone by. Suddenly, Kanagi dashes forward with blinding speed, slashing his sword and screaming that Midori can't touch him, but Midori leaps back just in time and laughs at how fierce Kanagi has become. The students can't believe their eyes as Midori takes the high ground, only for Kanagi to yell that Midori is boring and tell him to stop holding back, warning him that if he thinks he's too good for him, he'll punch him in the face, and right after Kanagi jumps in to fight, Midori just laughs and agrees. Midori kicks a stone hard, sending it flying at the weapons behind him. Before you can blink, the weapons rise into the air, and he leaps to snatch one, leaving Kanagi surprised as she cheers that Midori is finally giving it her all. Next, they leap into the sky to fight in the air, kicking at each other so hard that the students watching can't believe their eyes, and they grab every weapon nearby, smashing them into pieces just by using their raw strength. While the founders inside Kanagi's body watch Hinoi unleash his full power and praise Midori for keeping up, an old man spirit wants to join the fight only to be scolded as tactless, while the great wizard silently realizes that Kanagi has been secretly learning from Hanoki's movements. He watches Hinoi change his stance as he leaps up from below, only for the sword in his grip to shatter once more. Hinoi's anger boils over as he stares at the terrible weapon in his hands. Midori loves the fight, but when he runs out of swords, he starts worrying that Kanagi might reach for a gun. With a mocking grin, Midori yells that only 10 seconds are left and jokes about what Hinoi will do next, so Hinoi looks back at the building behind him and jumps right at it. He charges at the man who shoved Kanagi and grabs his sword, while Midori leaps in to punch Hananoi, creating a massive explosion against the building before Hananoi dodges and pops right in front of Midori. They dive back into their sky battle, trading punches, but Midori yells that it's so much fun and that they should keep going for a while. At the same time, the students see the building is about to fall apart. As the fight moves to the rooftop, Midori's secretary just watches with a relaxed smile. Midori grabs the huge fan and the weight of it forces cracks to split its surface. He grabs the fan from the building and hurls it with all his might, sending it hurtling straight at Hanaki. But Hinoi surprises him by slashing the dice fan with his one-handed sword, shattering it into tiny pieces as Midori cheers, only for Hinoi to immediately throw his sword at Midori, where it breaks apart upon impact. But Midori holds up his hand, waits until 60 seconds are up, then smacks Hananoi flat with his palm, but before Hananoi can curse or move, Kanagi jumps onto his back to shove him toward the others, and when Midori swings at him, Kanagi just gently pushes the attack away to stay safe. The sudden move leaves Hinoi and Midori speechless. But the force of the blow shatters one of Kanagi's hands. Even so, he stays locked on his target and punches Midori in the face with his only good hand, while inside the fight feels like an endless chess match where two equally skilled players clash over a tiny prize that Hinoi knows is already over, letting Kanagi see a new way to win as he watches with quiet pride, only for Midori to catch his fist just in time and leave Kanagi frustrated and shocked at missing his hit. But then to his surprise, Midori smiles and gently pulls Kanagi's fist toward his own face to acknowledge the effort, confirming without hesitation that Kanagi has passed, before both suddenly collapse to the ground as the watching students murmur in confusion, unable to understand what just happened, while Midori, still holding the unconscious Kanagi, calls for his secretary Ren and tells her they need to leave. Ren steps up to check on the result, and Midori confirms that Kanagi made it through, admitting she found him interesting before noting that he broke her arm by accident and asking Ren to heal her, which she agrees to do right away. The students, catching the words, can hardly believe that Kanagi has actually made it. Suddenly, the area explodes with cheers as everyone realizes Kanagi landed a real punch on Midori, the loud noise waking Kanagi up just as Ren rushes to heal him while gently telling him not to move, which he gratefully accepts before she congratulates him on passing the test. Kanagi jolts upright, still stunned, and wonders if he really managed to hurt Midori. Before he could think about it more, Midori suddenly showed up next to him, laughed at how he reacted, said a pass is just a pass without making a big deal of it, admitted he had taken the fight seriously right in the middle of his own attack stream, praised Kanagi for dodging his strongest move and moving so well, and told Kanagi to be proud of what he just did. Kanagi steadies himself and takes the compliment. He doesn't wait a second to look at what comes next, ready to see what happens after he passes. Ren pauses, looking a bit confused by his question, before she turns to face Midori. Midori, just as unsure as everyone else, looks around trying to find the right answer. Later that night, Kanagi helped his mom clean up while she cooked, and when she asked how many guests were coming, he guessed just one since he wasn't sure. His mom remembered that day as a huge moment, because Kanagi didn't just pass the hunter exam, he also caught Midori's eye. She told him she was sure he could do anything, because she knew he just needed to try. Kanagi listened in silence, soaking in every word she had just spoken. But then his mom's face changed as she joked that a famous guest might make their house look like a doghouse, and while Kanagi quickly dismissed her worries, insisting that Midori wasn't the kind of person to judge things like that. After finishing his chores and helping his mom, he finally collapsed onto his bed, only to feel a wave of doubt as he looked at Midori's card and wondered why Midori hadn't planned better, his thoughts drifting back to the battlefield where Ren had twisted Midori's leg and made her scream in pain. Right then, Midori reminded Kanagi of his earlier promise to join their team if they won, but Kanagi shook his head in confusion and denied ever saying that, while Ren, growing more upset, tightened her grip on Midori's leg. So Midori told Kanagi there were too many people watching and suggested he come to his home that night to talk it all out, promising to explain their choices and reveal who their real enemies truly were. Kanagi couldn't help but wonder who these enemies really were. He knew the founders had already brought the tower down and that today's hunters were just there to clean up any monsters that slipped through the broken dimensions. He wondered if there was another reason, but soon drifted off to sleep. Hinoki's sudden shouting woke him up like a jolt. He looked into the room and saw Hinoki and the founders all gathered together. Confused, he asked why they were there and what was wrong, but Hinoi just said they had been discussing something and had just finished, leaving Kanagi puzzled, instinctively covering himself and worriedly asking if they'd decided who would take his body. Just as Hinoi was about to reply, the doorbell rang. Kanagi apologized, guessed it was Midori, and offered to chat later. He walked toward the dark door, feeling uneasy in the shadows. Suddenly, to his horror, he found his mom lying on the floor. Panic surged through him as he shouted her name and lunged forward, only to freeze when he saw a stranger calmly eating his mother's cooking in a kitchen full of mess, praising the food while ignoring the chaos around him. The man sneered at Kane, telling her to scold her mom and demanding that Kanagi serve better food if she wanted to win over the customers. Kanagi instantly shouted who he was and what he had done to his mom. The man didn't even flinch, he just shouted at Kanagi to watch his tone, then introduced himself as Hitani Goru, an S-rank hunter and Midori's comrade. Hini commanded Kanagi to pack his bags for a move to their base, but Kanagi's anger burned hot inside. Without even hesitating, he threw a punch at Hitani, who easily dodged it and suddenly popped up behind him to ask if Kanagi was challenging him. Kanagi kept quiet, holding on to the words his mom had spoken. She vowed to raise him alone with pride after his father was gone. He recalled the tattered shoes she kept wearing even though she begged him to buy her new ones. He also recalled her earlier congratulations and promised to cook his favorite tonkatsu for dinner. With fresh resolve, Kanagi stared down Hitani and demanded to know what he had done to his mother, while Hinoi, watching from the sidelines, realized that Hitani was a legendary S-rank hunter from the past, and Hananoi, annoyed by Hitani's resemblance to Midori, decided it was finally time to make a move. The founders who had watched Kanagi battle Midori finally knew exactly how to treat him from then on. Hitani laughed and teased that Kanagi's angry face looked cute before raising his hand to slap him, only for Kanagi to stand stone still and take it all in stride. Just as the strike was about to land, Kanagi caught Hitani's hand and, with surprising ease, swung him around. Grandpa saw her standing there, completely shocked. He knew that fighting moved from the times they once faced monsters together. Suddenly, Hitani was flung out the window and crashed through the back wall, only to land on his feet before he even touched the ground. Hitani stepped back to steady himself, confused by what he just saw and wondering if that was Aikido. He recalled Kanagi's fight with Midori that afternoon, where he saw not just her massive aura and sword skills, but also that strange, peculiar power. He admits he is tougher than Hitani, showing off his own strength. Kanagi can't wait any longer, so he forces the man to finally admit what he did to his mother, who is still inside, writhing in agony as the poison takes hold. Hini just laughs and mockingly points out that Kanagi has no idea what is really happening. Then with a grin, he finally tells him the truth. His mother stood in the way, so he put her to sleep with a smirk, warning that she might only suffer minor side effects. He remains calm and claims he doesn't understand, leaving Hitani staring at him in confusion. Then he asks why they would hurt the family of someone who could become their friend. Hime only laughs at the word comrade until he suddenly appears behind him, ready to strike. He barely dodges the attack, but the assault keeps coming, while he shouts that he'll never be their ally, only a puppet following their orders, only for Hini to mock him by taunting that once his loved ones are hostages, he'll have no choice but to give in, and before he can even react, Hitani steps on his foot, slashes him, and asks if he was right. He hurriedly steps back as a burning sting hits his cheek. As he stretches his arm upward, he sees the poison is already working its way through his body. Hini grins and lifts his fingers, now studded with sharp poison-coated needles, teasing that the venom is already inside him and letting him unleash deadly phantom bugs and a poisonous gaze right from his body. Hitani grumbles that the mission is a real pain in the neck, noting that while he could easily blast toxic gas over 5 kilometers if he wanted to, dumping it right in the middle of the city is simply not an option. He warns that the poison will kill him in a minute unless he agrees to join their group, in which case they will give him an antidote, or he will die. He realizes the toxin is so deadly that for any ordinary person it means a death they can't escape. Looking down at his own hand, he shouts for Valentine, the goddess of medicine, to ask if she is within him, while the founders stare at her confused and startled as he apologizes for the sudden call and begs her to teach him how to wash away the poison later, which she stammers a yes to. Fuming, Hitani lashes out with another burst of poison, shouting in frustration to stop his mumbling nonsense. He swiftly dodges the attack and reveals that the Aikido move he just used was inspired by Kudua, the god of hands, leaving the old man inside him stunned to realize he managed to copy it after seeing it only once. Next, he summons the legendary warriors Hanoi, Shimmer Calcus, and Margit, declaring that the founder's great power now lives inside him. This leaves him so confused that instead of fear, he gets angry, shouting he'll show him real pain before Hini charges with his needles ready, but he leaps away just in time to dodge the strike. Hitani's strike strikes a nearby tree, causing it to wither and die right away. Hini doesn't wait and throws another strike, yelling that if the other man kneels and begs, he might just get an antidote to dull the pain, but he warns that once the pain takes over, he'll never be normal again, his mind slipping into madness, yet he stays quiet, just watching as the hand moves closer. Right as Hitani closes in, he dives out of the way just in time. He presses his hand against Hitani's chest to unleash Steinwalk's fist, causing Hitani to cough blood and shock One-Tak with it. The Bourse slams Hitani into a streetlight. Without even a second of doubt, he unleashes a kick with Irsen's light feet that sends Hitani flying far away, leaving Irsen stunned inside him while Hitani quickly stands back up. Suddenly, he's right in front of Hitani, striking with both hands, slipping past an attack to break some needles, then hitting his stomach hard before slashing with the dragon's claw skill. But this leaves Rowan, the voice inside him, completely stunned by the shock. Hitani grabs him, activates Leek's flipper, sends him flying through the air, and as he floats there spinning, he wonders what's going on. He knows the poison must be clouding his mind and wrecking his nerves, yet Kanagi keeps moving as if nothing is wrong. And Kanagi then fired the truth Megas, the Meltasentius, straight at Hitani. A massive burst of energy erupted, leaving everyone completely stunned in their tracks. Hinoi turned to the founders and asked if they had seen that. After besting Hitani, Kane immediately started learning their moves, copying both their physical strikes and magical spells. Hinoi admitted he didn't mind where Kanagi's power came from, only that the boy was interesting, a view the founders shared, so Hinoi proposed they train Kanagi to make him the strongest awakener, while in the same moment, hooded figures sprinted and leaped across rooftops, shouting that Nemo's guilds were hunting Kanagi and they had to hurry to catch him first. Midori suddenly popped up behind him to ask if that many were true, and though the man looked shocked, she calmly told him that if there were 15, he was definitely the last one. Midori flipped the man onto the roof, called out to Ren, who answered instantly to confirm she was safe and alone there, only to shock him by revealing that someone else had already been to this. Midori stayed silent, biding her time until it was her turn to speak. Ren revealed that the intruder was Hitani, a legendary S-rank hunter known for his deadly poison. He had raced to find Kanagi only to be utterly defeated, while Midori's gaze fixed on the rooftop where Hitani lay sprawled out, his mouth hanging slightly open. That left Midori wondering just what had really happened. Not long after, they arrived at Kanagi's house, where Midori cheered loudly with a wide smile, praising Kanagi and admitting he never thought he could defeat Hitani. He didn't wait a second before asking if Kanagi had gotten poisoned, and Kanagi just scratched his cheek and admitted it with a shy smile. "I'm good, and so is Mom." Hinoi crossed his arms in disbelief, reminding Kanagi that he survived the night only because of Valentine, causing Valentine to groan in exhaustion the moment her name was spoken. Hinoi admitted that finishing everything in just 5 seconds was no small feat, but Valentine just shrugged and said it wasn't hard at all, since the poison maker was right there to make getting blood samples and finding the cure a simple matter of a few quick jabs, so Kanagi stopped trying to make sense of it all, and finally asked the question that had been bothering him. Hitani wasn't telling the truth when he claimed to be Midori's ally, so Midori nodded immediately and explained that many people use his name just to take advantage of him. Now that it was settled, he glanced back at Ren to ask if she was finished, and right as he spoke, she stepped up beside him and gave a nod. She told him everything was fixed, but Kanagi stood frozen in disbelief, staring at his perfectly repaired house before Midori's bright smile invited him inside to talk about his future, leaving him caught between excitement and unease. The next morning, a car was waiting for Kanagi, and his mother walked him to the gate to see him off. She asked if he had forgotten anything, but Kanagi just said he was okay and that she worried too much. Couldn't believe the small child she raised was now heading to Midori's, where Midori had promised to turn him into a great hunter, making Kanagi excited even as his mother remained worried. She hid her worry and handed Kanagi his lunch, telling him to eat since he'd skipped breakfast, and he took it without arguing, even though he didn't really need it. Then his mother stepped right up and asked Midori if her son would get hurt. And Midori didn't hesitate, she confirmed it immediately. His mother admitted that trusting Midori with Kanagi was a big risk since her son had always struggled and she still felt uneasy, but Midori confidently promised to train him until he had no weaknesses left. After hearing this, she finally gave in and let him take Kanagi away. Once they're inside the car, Ren, who is driving, glances over at Midori and asks if it was okay to promise Kanagi's mom something so serious when they don't even know what's going to happen next. Midori worries for a second, then checks the rearview mirror and sees Kanagi's mom still giving him last-minute tips, like how to wash clothes and why he shouldn't sleep naked or catch a cold. Her worry sparks a fierce determination in Midori's eyes, and without a word, he promises to do his best. Kanagi keeps his feelings hidden and says his last goodbye. Right before he hops into the car, his mom gives him one last reminder to come back home for New Year's. As they speed away, Midori turns to Kanagi and asks if he is alright. Kanagi admits he had to hold his feelings back. Midori leans back in his seat and tells him to just do what feels right, whether that's eating or resting. Kanagi glanced around and spotted the neat lunchbox his mom had packed, sitting right beside him. He opens it, remembering his mom's words still ringing in his ears. When he lifts the lid, he sees a tiny note of good luck on his pork cutlet, and that simple act hits him so hard that he freezes, realizing all the care and sacrifice she has given him, letting a quiet thankfulness mix with tears as he eats, while his friends Ren and Midori watch silently from the side. As they keep moving forward and finally reach their goal, Kanagi stares in shock at the huge anti-prophecy headquarters building. Kanjiro Midori greets him and explains that only a very few Awakers are ever allowed inside. The heavy truth of what he's about to do presses down on him, and for a split second he's crushed by the realization of the dark path he's walking into, while inside one of the rooms a man stands by the window watching them arrive with a quiet, intense stare. He looks back and tells someone else in the room that the new members have arrived. The girl stares without a hint of emotion, wondering if this is truly about the new arrival. A young man replies that getting a new friend is quite rare, but another man standing nearby just doesn't believe him. He won't let them welcome the newcomer until they are sure he truly belongs in the anti-prophecy. Outside the headquarters, he stands frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of everything around him. Questions swirl in his mind, making him wonder just exactly what the anti-prophecy unit is. And could this be linked to the Ikihara Guild? Ren feels Ren's unease, realizes things aren't clear, and apologizes for not explaining sooner. She whispered that she couldn't tell his mom the truth because it was a top national secret, and those words struck him harder than he thought they would. So as they walked toward the building, Midori offered to take his luggage to the dorm first, but he politely refused, insisting he could manage it on his own. Just as he was about to move, a sudden voice cut through the air telling them to wait, startling him until he looked up and saw the young man from earlier standing above them, who declared without missing a beat that he would explain everything before lunging forward with a powerful kick that shattered the ground and sent a tremor right through him. Yet he stayed standing and impressed the man enough to earn rare praise and a pause before the stranger stepped back effortlessly to introduce himself as Hana Hikataru, a member of the anti-prophecy unit and his comrade, leaving him no time to hesitate as the truth was about to unfold. Meanwhile, Midori didn't even flinch. He simply asked Ren for some tea. Ren nodded and poured a drink for him while the other two kept fighting, with Midori watching them quietly and steadily. He asked Hinata why they fought if they were comrades, but Hinata calmly explained the battle served two purposes, introducing Kanagi to the anti-prophecy unit and testing his skills. The explanation got stuck in Kanagi's head, leaving him wondering just what kind of test this really was. Suddenly, Hinata struck with lightning-fast accuracy, sending another kick flying toward him. Kanagi moved fast to block the hit with both arms while staying steady, and even as they fought, Hinata began telling the story of the anti-prophecy unit. Kanagi listened, though he didn't believe Hinata would truly explain things while they were still fighting. As the conversation went on, Hinata stopped for a second to ask Kanagi her name before continuing. He didn't wait a second before telling them his name was Kanagi Minato. While Midori sipped his tea, he wondered if Kanagi would always be tested by the academy, him, and even an S-rank, but Ren calmly said there was no choice but to accept it. After all, Kanagi was personally picked out by someone. While Hinata kept kicking hard and Kanagi blocked with no sign of slowing down, Hinata suddenly asked what a hunter did, to which Kanagi calmly explained they clean up monsters from broken worlds, earning a thumbs up before comparing the job to simple pest control, only for Hinata to suddenly crash to the ground and ask a question that left Kanagi completely surprised. He paused, and then asked Hinata to explain what other danger she was talking about. As Hanada's face grew serious, he whispered of nightmares worse than cracks, like the Demon Castle from 10 years ago and the Kyushu outbreak from 5 years back, which Kanagi instantly knew were giant tears in reality that left deep wounds on the world. Before he could say a word, Hanada suddenly charged right at him. Kanagi instinctively threw up his arms to block the hit, but the punch was so strong that it still sent him skidding backward. Hinata nodded, impressed by how well he remembered the scary past disasters, and said that once he started training at the academy, Kanagi would finally understand everything about them. Just as Kanagi managed to steady himself, his breath was still carefully measured. Hinata was suddenly there, dropping from above with such shocking speed that Kanagi barely had time to throw himself out of the way as Hinata's foot crashed into the ground. A tree nearby absorbed the blow and snapped in two, but the force was so great that Kanagi stood frozen in shock for a heartbeat. Hinata stood up straight and his voice shifted as he kept explaining. He explained that the Tower of Malevolence wasn't just a disaster from 300 years ago, but a full-on invasion where another dimension attacked us directly. Kanagi could barely believe what he was hearing, for these weren't just old words but a reality crashing down right now. Hinata took a step forward, his face set in a serious look. Kanagi couldn't shake the worry that today's awakened ones weren't as strong as the legends of the tower, and after wrestling with his own doubts, he finally asked Hinata what they should do, only to hear that their secret team exists specifically to keep the public safe by sharing dangerous prophecies only with the few elites strong enough to handle them. Midori and Ren grinned with pride at the news. Kanagi suddenly understood that their only goal was to stop the prophecies from coming true, and Hinata officially welcomed him into their team, calling him the first person ever to block his kicks one after another. Hinata reached out to shake Kanagi's hand in acceptance, while Midori and Ren cheered, only to be stunned later when Hinata summoned silent figures from above, who vanished before he could ask them a single question. He guessed they just wanted to watch how the rest of it would unfold, so Hinata told Midori to leave it to him before she headed off. Afterward, Hinata helped Kanagi carry his things, offered to show him to his dorm room, and Kanagi thanked him. That night, as Kanagi got comfortable, his mind raced with the weight of his new duty to handle prophecies, wondering if the founders faced a similar crisis in the Tower's era, and if he was now fighting something that had been predicted. His mind made him feel nervous, until a voice cut through the fear and told him he'd only been training. Surprised, he turned to find Hanoki and the other founders standing right there, quickly apologizing for the delay, only for Hanoki to reassure him that they had already decided to train him to become the strongest awakener, just like Midori. With their help, he could become the strongest awakener ever and join their ranks as a disciple, which made Kanagi surprisingly ask if they truly wanted him, only for Hananoi to nod yes, but tease that it might turn into a fierce battle royale between them, causing Kanagi to beg them not to fight over him, while Hananoi explained that's how it usually started, though watching him closely made the founders change their minds. They realized that putting him through training was far more fun than just treating his body like a tool. Inoue explained that when Kanagi defeated the poison user, he didn't just copy their moves, but he learned the basics of them very quickly, even if he couldn't perform them quite as well. Inoue asked Kanagi if he realized how serious things were, noting that his ability came from the crest of nothingness. But what truly set him apart was his lightning-fast learning, a gift Inoue said was even greater than any talent the founders possessed. As Inoue spoke, Kanigi felt hot tears rising in his eyes. He remembered the disappointed looks on his old trainers' faces, who had told him he had no talent. For the first time, people stopped expecting nothing from him, making the whole thing feel like a dream after years of being bullied and failing the hunter test 3 times. Inoue still heard his friends mocking him, laughing and telling him to quit. His name faded into the noise of the crowd because no one cared to remember it, and since everyone doubted his future, he had long since learned to expect being ignored. But now 2 famous people, Midori and Hanoki, were treating him like one of their own, which shocked him so much he wondered if he truly deserved such a sudden gift. Then they found out his true souls lived inside him while he slept, giving him a special place where time and dimensions didn't matter. Knowing this, they mapped out his intense training plan. Every afternoon, he trained with the anti-prophecy squad, and every night, his dreams kept the lessons going. Though he had lost his peaceful sleep, he was ready for the challenge and followed their orders without hesitation. The night faded away and the morning arrived. Anto was washing his face in the bathroom when he suddenly saw him walk in. They exchanged greetings, but he still looked exhausted, admitting he hadn't caught up to the grueling schedule yet, much like Hinata had struggled with when he first started at the dorm. Suddenly, Hinata noticed something strange. A mighty energy was radiating from him. His curiosity piqued, so Hinata impulsively threw a swift kick, only for the other to effortlessly duck, spit out the water, and walk away without a second glance, dismissing the stunt as silly nonsense before heading to the cafeteria. Hinata stood there, completely stunned by what she had just seen. He noticed his strike was quicker than before, yet it slipped past her guard too easily. Moments later, Hinata found an open seat in the cafeteria, politely asked a woman eating fruit if she minded sharing the table, and after she gave a brief nod, he sat down and gestured for his friend to take the seat beside him. Then he recognized her as one of Hanata's comrades from the day before, yet she remained distant, speaking to him with strict formality to show she didn't want him there. Still, he stepped forward, smiled, and told her who he was. She didn't care to learn his name, and she had no intention of ever remembering it. She pointed her fork at him, demanded he earn her respect before acknowledging his name, and insisted that training and a mission to destroy a prophecy from 1945 buried in Antarctic ice were the only things that mattered, a prophecy with scribbled warnings of a devastating future that had everyone terrified, prompting her to ask him on the drive why the world still believed in those dark predictions. He paused, glanced at her with a confused look since he still didn't know her name, but before he could ask, she cut him off to demand his answer, and when he explained that the prophecies must be right, she laughed at him as if he was stupid. She warned him that if even a single page in the Book of Doom turned out to be true, the whole world would come to an end. That revelation stunned him, and as they kept talking, he turned to Hana to wonder how many prophecies were actually written down. Hanata guessed around 200, and that shocked him so much he couldn't speak, wondering if the world was already beyond saving. But Midori told him they'd already stopped nearly 18 of those prophecies, which left him totally amazed. Still trying to make sense of it all, he went back to wondering why the world believed the book so much. A woman told the story of how an explorer named Bernard Russell found the Book of Doom, and the moment he opened it, the first page greeted him by name with the exact date and time, March 17, 1945, 11:35 a.m., on a sunny day, proving the book's eerie accuracy. Hours later, they reached Tokyo's Sumida Ward, where a dimensional crack had opened, but guards blocked their path, saying the area was off limits. Yet they ignored the warnings, zipped past them with incredible speed, and left the guards momentarily stunned, as he hesitated, wondering if it was really okay to go on, but Hanada quickly reassured him it was. The woman then explained the massive crises they faced, listing World War, a dark moon, a deadly pandemic, and even floating trees as emergencies, noting that while the famous Book of Doom exists, it is just one of many magic books scattered across the world. The anti-prophecy unit works hard to gather clues, read the future, and stop bad things before they happen. She explained the terrifying threat levels, from a rank 1 that hurt the whole planet to a special rank that would wipe out the world itself, and as he realized how deadly these missions were, he nervously asked if they were truly up to the job, only for her to confirm with a steady voice that accepting the anti-prophecy unit meant taking on those deadly duties. Soon, Akane and his team spotted people crossing the warning line and stepped right up to stop them, but Akane assumed they were just locals and tried to warn them to go back since the area was deadly, though she quickly dismissed his fears because the prophecy for the day was only a rank 3 event, while the dangerous dimensional crack in front of them looked like a much stronger intermediate B rank. But it turned out to be a far greater danger, a level 3 disaster called the Yellow Journal, and as she watched in horror, the crack began to widen with terrifying speed, nearly swallowing Q whole. Akane spun around, his eyes going wide with horror as the crack ripped open and a flood of ever greater monsters poured out. He shouted for his squad to get ready for the fight, and they answered fast and hard. Monsters rushed in and crushed his army before he could even fight back. Their panic surged through him as he muttered curses, seeing even B and C rank hunters struggling to hold their ground, before his eyes locked onto a terrifying boss monster watching the newcomers advance. Akane stepped forward once more, shouting for them to hold their ground. Before he could speak again, the woman slammed her hand on the ground, casting a spell named Trismegistus that shot spears up from beneath to pierce the creatures, causing their bodies to collapse in a pool of blood. Hana didn't sit back, he charged in to strike as well. He surged forward with lightning speed, sweeping across the battlefield to slam every foe he met, leaving Akane stunned as she realized these warriors were far beyond her S-rank hunter and remained a complete mystery. Then the woman turned to Am and, without a second thought, ordered him to retreat, treating him like just any other civilian, while Akane glanced down at the mysterious emblem glowing on her hand. Recognition flashed across his face as he realized these weren't random visitors but government agents, and before he could even think, a giant hand burst through the dimensional crack to widen the rift, allowing the towering beast Gilia Oler, a creature far beyond Srank, to step through and loom over them with an overwhelming presence. The woman didn't wait and jumped forward to hit, but Akane shouted at her not to be so reckless, and she ignored the warning. Together they charged forward, ignoring the danger ahead, but Hanada soon found his kicks useless against the beastman, leaving him in shock. The creature's tough armor blocked his attacks, so he had to step back just as it charged at the woman. She didn't wait a second before she began pulling power in front of her, ready to meet the attack head-on. Just as she tried to react, Kanagi stepped between them and stopped the beastman's attack with a single bare hand, causing the beastman to explode in a flash of energy that left everyone stunned. Once everything quieted down, Hanada realized the attack had been a penetration shock. But what truly stunned him was seeing Kanagi knock out an S+ rank monster in a single blow, realizing that Kanagi's power had exploded overnight. Even though the woman yelled that he didn't need to use so much force, he knew that when fighting someone with a strong body, hitting from the inside is the best move. He learned the basics of breaking into systems from Wantak, the Fist Saint, just the night before. After that, Kanagi turned to the girl and asked for her name, saying he'd saved her so he at least deserved to know, and she happily told him it was Shinomiya Akane, before they rushed to keep moving. Hanada spun around to face the battlefield, pumping up her strength to fight the fresh wave of monsters rushing out of the crack. The woman didn't even flinch. She countered by soaking her foes in liquid mercury and then blowing them up with a fiery burst from her special Mercurius reject skill. Together, they pushed ahead, realizing that Kannagi was right. Tearing their foes apart from within worked far better than fighting them directly. She pushed forward and signaled Hana, and without a second thought, they both ran straight toward the dimensional crack. Akane stood frozen in disbelief, peering through a crack at a world beyond it teeming with unknown and terrifying dangers. Before he could even move, they had already charged forward, leaping through the narrow gap without a second thought, leaving Akane standing amidst the cold, lifeless bodies of powerful monsters. And it struck him, these two weren't just regular fighters, but members of that rumored secret group, and the instant they entered the new world, a terrifying army of monsters sprang up to meet them. Akane quickly checked what was happening, saw that the monsters were just like the ones outside, and then raised her hand. With perfect precision, she conjured a barrage of mercury spears that instantly impaled the creatures, causing Kannagi, who was still running, to watch her technique and acknowledge her immense power, finally understanding why she was considered the strongest area of effect fighter in the anti-prophecy unit. After defeating the other enemies, Akane stood before a massive bear monster, but just as she was about to attack, Hinata leaped toward it first. The bear spotted him and swung its claws, but Hinata slipped away by leaping onto the roof. After Hanada danced around the beast with a giggle, Kannagi suddenly rushed the bear and kicked it just like him, even asking if it looked the same, which made Hanada smile in amazement. After they slayed the monster, they marched on into the unknown. As Akane stepped deeper into the dark place, she found fewer enemies, until she finally reached a vast open area that looked just like a giant arena. Suddenly, a strange feeling wrapped around them and they knew something was coming. Suddenly, a massive furious Minotaur boss with triple S-rank power leaped right in front of them, leaving Hinata and Kannagi stunned by its size, while Akane just stood there casually wondering if it really was the boss. Then, a wave of spears flew out from the portal. Ash screamed for everyone to unleash their hardest hits while she took the next thing on, and Hinata started gathering power while Kannagi just stood there, completely blown away by what they were doing. But deep inside, he knew he probably couldn't beat the beast. When Han heard Kannagi doubt their strongest moves, he was shocked because even after they unleashed a massive barrage of magic, the beast just swung its huge weapon to carve a giant crater and send powerful shockwaves across the arena, leaving everyone stunned once the dust finally settled. The beast stood tall, not a scratch on its skin. Even after landing some big blows, the group got ready to fight again. Just as Kannagi was getting ready, he suddenly heard someone telling how talented Akane was. He heard a familiar voice that belonged to Killick, the founder spirit, who worried that pure and strong Akane might waste her talents by dying so young against this Minotaur that had resisted her full 100% power, while her friends Kannagi and Hinata urged for help as the beast tore at them. They wished they'd brought a magic expert along. As Akane looked at Kannagi, she was stunned by the weird energy rolling off him. Kannagi let Killick take over his body to unleash a spell that froze the beast's legs, leaving everyone stunned, because Kannagi used the same kind of power as Akane, but in a way that completely stopped the creature in its tracks. Killick, who was still steering Kannagi's body, stared hard at Akane and called her a fool. Then chided her for not being flexible enough with her skills, telling her she still had to learn how to control substances in 3 different forms before she could truly become an alchemist. As Killick talked, he flooded the Minotaur's body with liquid mercury, then cast a boiling spell the moment the metal started leaking from its mouth, heating the beast's insides until toxic fumes filled the arena and choked everyone, while Akane watched in awe to see that Kick had defeated the monster with scorching heat instead of brute strength as the Minotaur twisted in agony from the burning inside. As Killick cast the spell, he casually told Kannagi he wanted to make Akane his disciple, but Kannagi just laughed it off as a joke. Finally, the scalding mercury drowned the Minotaur, leaving it nothing but a cold pile on the floor. And just like that, the day's mission was over with a victory after beating the level 3 prophecy boss, leaving Akane in shock as she stared at Kannagi using a crest skill that should have been impossible for someone of his rank. Kannagi smiled with confidence, reached out his hand, and said hello. Ganfa shook the man's hand with a mix of annoyance and curiosity, letting him know she'd remember him, which made Hinata beam with joy as Kannagi finally got her attention, while their team waited outside and watched in shock as the dimensional crack began to close, forcing the trio to leap out just before it sealed, only for Kannagi to ask if the mission was truly done and be told they just needed to head back to headquarters. While they discussed their next move, Akane approached them to thank them for rescuing his team. He gave his word that he'd stop digging into who they were or what had happened inside. Akane thanked him for getting it and told him to write the emblem details in his report so the authorities would understand everything. As the 3 of them began to walk away, Akane let them know he'd be there to help if they ever got into trouble. Akane turned around and told him they probably wouldn't meet again, saying he needed to go back to his normal life. Hearing this, Akane suddenly understood that they were just ordinary people living in a world he could never reach. On May 11th, a bright red flash raced across the streets of On Prefecture Village. A guard stares at it with total confusion, unable to guess what it is, until suddenly a loud roar shakes the village, and back at HQ, the trio steps out of their car with Akan reminding them to write their report. Suddenly, Haneda's phone buzzed with a message summoning them to the lab, an odd request right after their mission, so they hurried over to find two people waiting, one standing on a stage, and another sitting in the stands, who then declared in a commanding voice that Akane took far too long to handle a rank 3 disaster. Kanagi knows right away who he is. It's the red-haired guy from before. Akane gets mad at him for acting like he's the boss when he isn't, so Hanada rushes in to calm things down and learns the guy on stage is actually the director. Once everyone is settled, he plays a video from the analysis team showing a glowing red-hot piece of charcoal that the director says is a prophecy grimoire. He says they discovered it in a volcanic area and have been studying it ever since, while Kenny doubts whether anyone could actually read a grimoire that's in such terrible condition. The director fixes his glasses and shows that they managed to decode the message using AI and X-rays, even though the exact words are still a mystery. But the one clue they cracked out of the mess mentioned Japan, and everyone in the room froze in shock, especially AI, because this was a prophecy they'd never seen before. The director goes on to explain that research into predicting the future has gotten so far ahead that we can't ignore it. We usually gather news from everywhere, so finding this strange prophecy is very rare, but this time things are different. The red-haired man gets it right away, and now all four of them must investigate. The director commends his keen understanding and explains that this special mission was meant for regular team members who are unavailable, which makes Kanagi realize that this is why Midori wasn't there when they returned. The director orders them to leave immediately, promising more details will follow by email, leaving Kanagi stunned at how fast another mission has landed, while the red-haired man simply tells him he'll get used to it. But as Kanagi clutches his fists in uneasy dread that the world's fate hangs in the balance, Su slams his hand on the table and rises to his feet. He announced in a bossy tone that he and his 3 subordinates would take on the mission, while Akane looked annoyed at his acting like a boss, and as they left, the director gave them a final warning to stay cautious because they didn't know how severe the mission was, and reminded them that even if the prophecy started unfolding, they'd have to wait for the main force before doing anything drastic. From the front seat, So suggested they stop and rest, noting that Kanagi had just finished his first mission, but the proud Akane refused, insisting he had no right to give her orders. To her surprise, both Hanada and Kanagi grabbed his offer and were instantly fast asleep. Aang tried hard to stay awake, struggling against the heavy pull of sleep. But as the night grew heavy, tiredness finally won and she drifted off too. A while later, the car came to a halt, and as Akane woke up, she found the seat beside her empty. She rushed outside to find the others staring in shock at a gigantic glowing circle on the ground where skeletal figures were trapped in crystals, signaling that the prophecy was almost finished and the danger was far worse than anyone expected. Cold shiver ran down their spines as they realized they might be too late, because those skeletons were the 23 villagers mentioned in the report, just like the terrible incident Su had seen before. 30 years ago, the Wakayama mansion simply disappeared and a tier to another world almost ripped open. As he spoke, the giant pillar right in the middle of the magic circle suddenly burst with waves of energy. Seeing this, Suo shouted for them to hurry up. So pulled out his sword while Hanada asked what they should do next. So showed that they had to stop it. Akane quickly told him to remember the director's orders to wait, but before they could even talk about it, a huge energy suddenly appeared behind them, and when they turned around, they saw Kanagi covered in that power and ready to fight. The group instantly noticed Kanagi felt way stronger than before. Even so, Suo didn't even flinch. He jumped ahead and shouted for everyone to follow, with Akane urgently warning him not to be so reckless as they all rushed after him. As Hinoi and the mage rushed toward the glowing circle, a strange familiar smell suddenly filled the air, one they had known all their lives. Suddenly the ground shook violently as a massive hand erupted from below the earth, causing Hanoki's eyes to widen in shock at the forbidden burning stench that filled the air, while Hinoi explained that the dark magus Bandu Shijima had once murdered an entire village and used their blood to draw a magic circle that would bring him back to life 1,000 years later. He's out to eat everyone and become the demon king who rules the whole world. Before he passed, he left behind a forbidden trick that revealed how people would be sacrificed to bring him back to life. Nowhere to be found, Shijima has returned as a mysterious big shot with one clear goal. His mission is to bring the heat, but looking at his weak hands he frowned, wondering if the ritual had not taken enough sacrifices, and as he grinned maniacally at the approaching anti-prophecy team, thinking they were just more food for his fire, he unleashed a blast of dark energy that exploded right under them, scaring Kanagi when it hit Hinata and Akane, only to see them standing fine once the smoke cleared. His face turns dark as a black magic circle blooms beneath their feet, summoning hundreds of spirits that claw at Hinata and Akane, but they fight back hard, realizing Shijima is far more powerful than they expected. While Shijima watches his magic, Kanagi suddenly strikes from behind, but Shijima dodges with ease and mocks him for being an amateur before dropping a spell under him. Though the blast hits, Kanagi stands unharmed and counters with his own thunderbolt that Shijima blocks with dark magic, impressing him with the choice, only for Suo to appear and fire a storm of sharp knives that Shijima leaps over. Realizing Suo already knew he wouldn't be taken down by such a weak move as Suo rains more blades from the sky, which Shijima simply calls a rain of lights, until Suo blocks Shijima's counterattack so hard that the recoil makes Shijima realize Suo is likely the strongest fighter there. Kanagi, watching from the sidelines, thinks Shijima's power never runs out. This enemy is unlike any they've faced, and even Shijima himself feels stronger than the founders. As Kanagi thinks, his friends shout from behind. Yae turns and is stunned to see Akane and Hinata taking black art hits before they break away and charge at Shijima, who summons 3 skeleton demons to block their rush as Hinata kicks one straight away. But to his shock, it doesn't work at all. The skeletons were as hard as the minotaurs they had beaten before, so while Shijima and Suo kept hitting each other and a skeleton blocked Kanagi's path, Shijima laughed at Suo for having no friends, only for Suo to slash the creature's shoulder and prove he didn't need any help. He pointed at Shijima and warned him to back off because he only trusted his own strength, but Shijima just brushed the blood from his wound, screamed like a madman that he needed no one and would devour them all, and then charged straight at Suo, who barely managed to block the blow just inches from his body. While Suo fought hard to keep Shijima's non-stop attacks away, he heard someone shout his name from behind. Kanagi was charging straight at Shijima. Shijima stood frozen in shock when he saw Kanagi, which was even more surprising since he'd just sent a demon to stop him. He glanced back quickly and saw the others still wrestling with their own struggles. But the man he sent to chase Kanagi was found sliced perfectly in two. Just as Shijima tried to make sense of what was happening, Kanagi drove a hard punch into his face, slamming him backward across the ground. Even Sowa stood in awe at the sheer power of that strike. Kanagi then proposed that they team up to take down Shujima. Akofo stood still for a split second, completely stunned by what he had just seen. Kanagi and Akane hadn't even finished their own fights yet, but this guy had already won and was now offering to help them. So's pride blinded him, so he flatly turned down Kanagi's help and insisted on fighting alone. But just as they argued, Shijima rushed in and fired a deadly beam that knocked Kanagi into a tree, leaving him dizzy and fading out. As he faded away into darkness, he caught a glimpse of Hanoki and the mage's spirit standing right before him, and Hanoki explained that he had fainted, which is how they had been able to bring him into his own mind. Even though Kanagi's body was aching and broken, he pushed himself up and begged them to let him fight again. Before they could reply, a powerful voice boomed across the room, ordering him to stop fighting right then. Outside, Suo was barely keeping up with Shujima's non-stop attacks, and Shujima even smirked, complimenting Suo for thinking exactly like him. Confident that no one else could save them, Shujima sneered with a hungry grin and unleashed his power, smashing Suo's sword in two with a single crushing blow. Suo was shocked, but he quickly grabbed another blade and swung it at Shujima, who dodged it easily by bending his back with a flexibility that felt like magic. Shujima was clearly having more fun while Suo kept fighting back. Meanwhile, in the spirit world, Kanagi watched the battle from afar, knowing Shujima was the strongest fighter there. Noi warned Kanagi that the task was far too much for him, noting that Shujima's aim was frighteningly perfect. If more people had lived there, Shujima might have become a demon king already. She told Kane that if Shujima killed him, it would only make him stronger and let him destroy the world. She even claimed that finding the grimoire was nothing but a lucky accident. Then Hinoi stepped forward and asked Kanagi to lend him his body so they could handle it. But to their total shock, Kanagi flat out refused. He apologized, but he made it clear that this wasn't practice, it was for real. He told me he'd have to face this hurdle on his own, just as he would have to in the days ahead. With a bold smile, he asked if they were ready, only to laugh and tell Kanagi that he'd already won when the mage tried to speak up. Hinoi rested a hand on Kanagi's shoulder, a quiet reminder that he was destined to rise above even the founders. He told Kanagi to use all his new skills and do things his own way, which gave Kanagi a huge boost of confidence. With a determined look, he rushed onto the battlefield to ask the founders to watch over him, diving straight into the fight where Shujima and the battered Suo were still battling hard. Just as Suo opened his eyes, Shujima struck again and sent him flying through the air, but before Shujima could deliver the final blow to end it all, Kanagi swooped in to grab Suo and his sword, then tossed the dazed warrior safely out of the way of an incoming magic beam as Suo crashed hard onto the ground, forcing Shujima to turn his deadly breath attack toward Kanagi instead, leaving him stunned. Kanagi calmly uses Hananoi's one-handed sword style to slice Shujima's breath attack in half and then cleanly cut off his arm, leaving Shujima stunned and furious as he yells about his identity. But Kanagi, looking completely determined, responds coldly that he's the one who will surpass